The morning I had my stroke, I was reviewing investment portfolios worth millions. By evening, my son was calling me a burden while standing in the hallway of Portland General, not realizing the irony that 40% of his company's startup capital was sitting in the hospital bed he was so eager to walk away from. Life has a way of revealing people's true colors in the most unexpected ways. I never planned to use my wealth as leverage against my own child, but when Daniel looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, we just don't have room for you in our lives right now," something inside me broke far worse than the blood vessels in my brain. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I always thought of myself as a relatively successful woman, not extraordinary by any means, but comfortable and accomplished in my own right. For 30 years, I worked as a financial consultant, helping others build wealth while quietly accumulating my own. I wasn't born into money, far from it. My parents were school teachers who valued education above everything else. They scraped together enough to send me to college, and I promised myself I would never take their sacrifice for granted. I met James Mitchell during my sophomore year at Northwestern. He was studying engineering while I pursued finance. We married young, probably too young, but we were determined to build something meaningful together. When Daniel was born, I stepped back from my career for 3 years to care for him. Those early days were challenging but beautiful. Watching his first steps, hearing his first words, seeing his personality emerge. James and I promised each other we would always prioritize Daniel's well-being, no matter what happened between us. As it turned out, our marriage couldn't withstand the pressures of James's growing engineering firm and my return to finance. We divorced when Daniel was 8, but remained amicable co-parents. I never spoke ill of James to Daniel, and James never attempted to turn our son against me. When James passed away from pancreatic cancer when Daniel was 20, I was devastated alongside my son. We leaned on each other during those dark days, and I thought our bond was unbreakable. Daniel was naturally brilliant, just like his father. He graduated from Stanford with honors and had ambitious dreams of starting his own renewable energy company. When he approached me about helping him with initial funding, I didn't hesitate. I believed in him completely. "Mom, I've found a breakthrough approach to solar energy storage," he told me over dinner one night, his eyes bright with passion. "But I need startup capital, and venture capitalists want too much control. I don't want to lose my vision to their bottom line." I nodded, understanding his dilemma perfectly after decades in finance. "How much do you need to get started?" Daniel slid a business plan across the table. "We're looking at about $4 million to launch properly. I've saved $600,000, and Jason has another $400. We're still short $3 million. I reviewed his projections carefully. They were ambitious but not unrealistic. After 30 years of strategic investments and careful saving, I had accumulated a substantial portfolio, including a significant trust left to me by Howard Blackwell, my mentor at the investment firm who had no children of his own. "I'll help you," I said simply, "but I have one condition." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "My investment remains anonymous, even within the company. I'll establish a shell corporation to funnel the funds. No one needs to know it's me. I don't want special treatment or for your team to think you didn't earn this on your own merit." Daniel seemed confused but agreed. "If that's what you want, Mom, but why the secrecy?" I smiled gently. "Because I want you to succeed on your own terms. I believe in you, but others need to see you as self-made. Trust me, I've seen how family money can taint perceptions in business." So Aurora Investments was born, a shell company that became the primary investor in Innovate Northwest. Over the next 10 years, my initial investment grew to over $15 million as the company flourished. Daniel never revealed my connection to the business, and I never sought recognition. I was content watching from the sidelines as my son built his empire. During this time, Daniel married Vanessa, a sharp-minded marketing executive who helped propel Innovate Northwest to new heights. They had my grandson, Tyler, and purchased a stunning home in Portland's West Hills. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. I continued my consulting work, though scaled back as I approached retirement. At 62, I was looking forward to finally traveling, perhaps volunteering with financial literacy programs for underprivileged communities. My modest craftsman home in Laurelhurst was paid off, my investments were thriving, and I was contemplating how to give back more meaningfully. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was preparing for a meeting with Howard's estate lawyer. My old mentor had recently passed, leaving me as the executor of his considerable holdings. The kitchen light suddenly seemed too bright, and my coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. When I tried to speak aloud to myself, the words came out garbled and slurred. The left side of my body felt heavy, unresponsive. I knew immediately what was happening. My mother had experienced the same symptoms before. Her stroke. With my right hand, I managed to reach my phone and dial 911. That single action likely saved my life. The next hours were a blur of emergency rooms, CT scans, and concerned medical professionals. By evening, I had been stabilized, but the neurologist was frank about my prognosis. "You've experienced a moderate ischemic stroke, Ms. Mitchell," Dr. Hayes explained. "You've been fortunate. We administered TPA in time to prevent the worst outcomes. However, you're facing a significant recovery period. You'll need rehabilitation therapy for the weakness on your left side, and there may be some cognitive challenges to work through." I nodded, processing this new reality through the fog of medication. "How long until I can return home?" "That depends on your progress, but I wouldn't expect less than 6 weeks of intensive rehabilitation. And even then, you shouldn't be alone. For the first few months, do you have family who can help?" Daniel and Vanessa arrived shortly after this conversation. They spoke with the doctors while I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I awoke more fully, Daniel was sitting beside my bed, his expression a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. "The doctor says you'll need extensive rehab, Mom," he said, his tone businesslike. "And then you'll need care at home for several months, maybe longer?" "Yes," I replied, my speech still slightly slurred. "I'll hire someone to help me at home." Daniel exchanged a glance, with Vanessa, who was standing by the window, arms crossed. "Mom, your insurance will only cover a fraction of the costs. Professional in-home care is extremely expensive." "I know," I said, "but I have savings." Vanessa stepped forward. "Eleanor, we've been looking at your finances while you were unconscious. Your retirement account isn't nearly as robust as you led us to believe." I frowned, confused by this statement, and disturbed that they had been investigating my finances without permission. "My finances are fine," I insisted. "Mom," Daniel said with forced patience, "you have maybe 200,000 in accessible funds. The kind of care you'll need could easily burn through that in a year, especially if there are complications." Then what? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of their concern. They had no idea about my actual holdings, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the substantial trust from Howard, or even my position as Aurora Investments. I had always lived modestly, reinvesting most of my earnings. The accounts they had discovered represented less than 5% of my actual wealth. But something stopped me from revealing the truth. Perhaps it was the calculating look in Vanessa's eyes or the way Daniel spoke about my condition as though it were primarily a financial inconvenience. I decided to wait, to observe. "I'll manage," I said simply. Daniel sighed heavily. "Mom, be realistic. You can't live alone in that house anymore. It has stairs, narrow doorways. What if you need a wheelchair?" "I might not," I pointed out. The doctor said I could recover significant function with therapy. And if you don't? Vanessa interjected. Daniel and I have discussed this, and we've looked into some excellent assisted living communities. Assisted living? I repeated, stunned by how quickly they had jumped to this solution. I'm 62, not 92. I've had a stroke, not dementia. It's the most practical solution, Daniel insisted. They have medical staff on site, no stairs to navigate, and social activities to keep you engaged. And what about my home? My belongings? My independence? My voice rose despite my weakened state. Daniel had the decency to look uncomfortable. We could rent out your house to cover the assisted living costs. If you need more funds, maybe consider selling it. The house I had owned for 30 years, the home where I had raised him after James and I divorced, the place where I had nursed James during his final months when his new wife couldn't handle his declining health. They wanted me to surrender it all without a second thought. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. Vanessa's expression hardened. Eleanor, you're not thinking clearly right now. The stroke has affected your judgment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My judgment is perfectly intact, I replied coldly. And so is my authority over my own life decisions. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. Mom, please, we're trying to help. You. By shipping me off to a facility against my wishes? That's not help, Daniel. That's convenience. The conversation deteriorated from there. As my frustration grew, my speech became more slurred, which only reinforced their perception that I was incapable of making rational decisions. Eventually, a nurse asked them to leave, concerned about my rising blood pressure. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Daniel and Vanessa visited daily, always armed with brochures for assisted living facilities and legal documents they urged me to sign. Power of attorney, healthcare directives, even preliminary paperwork to list my house with a realtor. I refused to sign anything, which only increased their frustration. One afternoon, about a week into my hospital stay, Daniel arrived alone. He pulled a chair close to my bed and took my hand. Mom, he said gently, I know this is hard, but you need to understand our position too. Vanessa and I both work demanding jobs. Tyler has school and activities. Our house isn't set up for someone with mobility issues. We'd need to renovate extensively to accommodate you. I'm not asking to move in with you, I clarified. I just want to return to my own home with appropriate support. Daniel's expression shifted, a flash of irritation breaking through his carefully constructed patience. And who's going to provide that support? Who's going to be there when you fall trying to reach something? Who's going to drive you to doctors? Appointments 3 times a week? Who's going to manage your medications? There are services. Services cost money, Mom. Money you don't have. His voice rose sharply. I'm trying to be practical here. Our company is at a critical growth stage. I can't step back to become your caretaker. Vanessa's launching a major campaign. We don't have room in our lives for this kind of disruption right now. His words hit me like a physical blow. Disruption, I repeated, my voice barely audible. Is that what I am now? A disruption? Daniel seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. He backpedaled quickly. That's not what I meant. We have so many obligations already, and this is so unexpected. Life often is, I replied softly. When you came to me needing $3 million to start your company, that was unexpected too. But I didn't call you a disruption. Then did I? He had the grace to look ashamed, but only momentarily. That was different, and I paid you back. I almost laughed. He had paid me back with minimal interest, completely unaware that his company's major investor, Aurora Investments, was actually me, and that my total stake in his company now exceeded $15 million. You know what hurts the most? Daniel, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. It's not that you don't want to care for me. I never expected that. It's that you're so quick to discard me, to erase my independence, to treat me as a burden rather than your mother, who has supported you throughout your entire life. Daniel's face flushed. That's not fair. We're trying to find a solution. No, I interrupted. You're trying to find the solution that causes you the least inconvenience, regardless of what I want. The conversation ended in a stalemate. Daniel left frustrated, and I remained resolute. That night, lying alone in my hospital room, I made a decision. I would not reveal my financial status yet. I wanted to see how far they would go, how much they truly valued me beyond my usefulness or convenience to their lives. The next day, I was transferred to Pinewood Rehabilitation Center to begin intensive therapy. The facility was pleasant enough, clean, well-staffed, with large windows overlooking a forested area. My physical therapist, Carlos, was demanding but encouraging. My speech therapist, Diane, celebrated every small improvement. Slowly, I began to reclaim control of my body and voice. Daniel and Vanessa visited less frequently now that I was settled. When they did come, they always brought more brochures, more pressure. 2 weeks into my rehabilitation, during one such visit, Daniel delivered the ultimatum that would change our relationship forever. "Mom, we've found a perfect solution," he announced, placing a glossy brochure on my lap. Evergreen Senior Living has an immediate opening. They provide all levels of care, from independent living to full nursing support. We've already put down a deposit to hold the space. I looked at the brochure, a luxury facility certainly, but still an institution. "And my house?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Vanessa stepped forward. "We've spoken with a realtor. Given the current market, they believe we could sell quickly, especially in Laurelhurst. The proceeds would fund several years at Evergreen." "You've listed my house without my permission?" I was incredulous. "Not officially," Daniel clarified. "But we wanted to be prepared. Mom, be reasonable. You can't go back there." "According to whom?" "My doctors are pleased with my progress. I'm regaining strength in my left side. My speech is nearly normal again." "But you're not the same," Daniel insisted. "And you might never be. What happens if you have another stroke? What if next time you can't reach the phone?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy I had raised, the man I had supported, the CEO I had funded. And I saw nothing of that little boy who used to crawl into my lap with skinned knees seeking comfort. Instead, I saw a man consumed by his own convenience, viewing his mother as a liability to be managed rather than a person, to be respected. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom?" "Get out, Daniel. You too, Vanessa. I'm not signing anything. I'm not selling my house. And I'm certainly not moving into Evergreen or any other facility against my wishes." Daniel's expression darkened. "You're being irrational. The stroke has affected your judgment more than you realize." "My neurologist disagrees," I replied coolly. "In fact, Dr. Patel has confirmed that my cognitive function is excellent. I'm fully capable of making my own decisions. But not physically. Capable of living independently," Vanessa argued. "That's not for you to determine," I said firmly. "Now please leave. I'm tired and I have therapy in an hour." Daniel stood, frustration radiating from him. "Fine. Be stubborn. But when your money runs out and you have nowhere to go, don't come crying to us. We tried to help you." As they reached the door, he turned back, his expression cold. "You've become a burden, Mom. Not just financially, but emotionally. We have our own lives to live. We can't put everything on hold because you refuse to accept reality." And with those words, he left, Vanessa close behind him. I sat in silence for several minutes, allowing the pain of his statement to wash over me, a burden. After everything I had sacrificed, everything I had given, a burden. That evening, I called Raymond Chen, my personal attorney. "Raymond," I said when he answered, "I need you to come to Pinewood tomorrow. There are several matters we need to discuss urgently." "Of course, Eleanor. Is everything all right?" "No," I replied honestly. "But it will be. I'm making some changes." Raymond arrived the next morning, briefcase in hand, concern evident on his face. I laid out everything that had transpired and what I wanted to do next. "Are you certain about this?" he asked after I finished explaining. "These are significant changes." "I've never been more certain," I assured him. "Daniel has shown me exactly where I stand in his priorities. It's time I showed him where he stands in mine." Raymond nodded and began drafting the necessary documents. By the end of our meeting, my plan was in motion. Aurora Investments would soon make its true identity known, and Daniel would discover exactly who held the purse strings to his company's future. But first, I had my own future to secure. I spent the next 4 weeks throwing myself into rehabilitation with renewed determination. I worked with Carlos until my muscles screamed, practiced speech exercises with Diane until I could recite poetry, without a single slur, and consulted with occupational therapists about modifications that would allow me to safely return home. Daniel and Vanessa didn't visit again. They called occasionally, leaving terse messages about the continuing opportunity at Evergreen and the potential buyers interested in my house. I didn't return their calls. Instead, I focused on healing, on reclaiming my independence, and on preparing for the confrontation that was inevitably coming. The day before my scheduled release from Pinewood, I received an unexpected visitor. Grace Wilson, my neighbor of 15 years, arrived with a bouquet of fresh flowers and a determined expression. "Eleanor Mitchell," she said, placing the flowers on my bedside table and fixing me with a stern look. "Why didn't you tell me you were here? I had to hear it from the McGraths 3 doors down." I smiled, genuinely happy to see her familiar. "Hiao, I didn't want to trouble anyone, Grace." She snorted dismissively. "Trouble? We've been neighbors for 15 years. That counts for something in my book." Her expression softened. "How are you, really?" For the first time since my stroke, I found myself telling someone the whole truth about my condition, my recovery, and Daniel's betrayal. Grace listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged. "That ungrateful little—" she finally burst out. "After everything you've done for him?" "He doesn't know the half of it," I admitted. "I've never told him about my full financial situation." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Why ever not?" I sighed. "I wanted him to make his own way, to feel his success was earned. And I suppose I wanted to be loved for myself, not my money." "Well," Grace said firmly, "that experiment has yielded its results, hasn't it? So what happens now?" I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Now, Grace, I take back control. I go home, to my home, and I show my son exactly what he's thrown away." Grace nodded approvingly. "And I'll be right next door if you need anything. In fact, I'm driving you home tomorrow. No arguments." As she left, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced since before the stroke. Family isn't always blood, I realized. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when others walk away. That night, I received one final call from Daniel. I answered, curious about what he might say. "Mom," he began, his tone carefully modulated to sound concerned rather than controlling. "The social worker at Pinewood tells me you're being discharged tomorrow." "That's right," I confirmed. "And where exactly do you plan to go?" "Your house isn't ready. There are no modifications for your condition." Actually, there are, I corrected him. Raymond has arranged everything. Grab bars have been installed, a stair lift is operational, and a monitoring system is in place. There was a pause. Raymond? Your lawyer? Mom? You can't afford those kinds of modifications. It seems I can, I replied calmly. No, you can't. Daniel's frustration broke through. I've seen your accounts, remember. You barely have enough for basic care, let alone home modifications and live-in assistance. You've seen what I allowed you to see, I said. Nothing more. Another. Pause longer this time. What are you talking about? Daniel, for someone so successful in business, you've made a fundamental error. You assumed you had complete information when you made your assessment. You didn't. Mom, if you're talking about some hidden savings account, I'm talking about Aurora Investments, I interrupted. Does that name sound familiar to you? The silence that followed was deafening. Aurora Investments, his company's primary backer, the entity that owned 40% of Innovate Northwest, the investor that had recently been pushing for a board seat. What about Aurora? He finally asked, his voice strained. I think we should continue this conversation in person, I said. Why don't you come to my house tomorrow evening? 7 o'clock. We have much to discuss about your company's future. I ended the call before he could respond. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I had been preparing for. Daniel would finally learn that the burden he had so callously dismissed was actually holding his professional fate in her hands. As I settled back against my pillows, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness mingled with resolve. I hadn't raised my son to be this person, calculating, cold, willing to discard family when they became inconvenient. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the values I thought I had instilled in him. But perhaps it wasn't too late for him to learn one final lesson from his mother. A lesson about consequences, about respect, and about the true meaning of family. The morning of my discharge from Pinewood arrived with surprising clarity. Outside, my window autumn leaves danced in the breeze against a brilliant blue sky. It felt symbolic somehow, nature shedding its old layers to prepare for renewal. I was doing the same, in my own way. My physical therapist, Carlos, came in for a final assessment, smiling as I demonstrated my improved mobility. You've made remarkable progress, Eleanor, he said, making notes in my chart. Most patients take months to achieve what you've accomplished in weeks. I've had strong motivation, I replied, thinking of the confrontation awaiting me. Dr. Patel arrived next for my final neurological evaluation. She checked my reflexes, tested my cognitive function, and reviewed my medication schedule. Your recovery has been exceptional, she confirmed. But remember, you're still healing. Don't overexert yourself in these first few weeks at home. I nodded, accepting the discharge papers and prescription refills she handed me. I understand my limitations, doctor, but I also understand my capabilities. She smiled knowingly. Just as important. Now, I want to see you back here in 2 weeks for a follow-up. Your outpatient therapy schedule is already arranged, 3 days a week to start. As Dr. Patel left, Grace arrived, bringing with her a sense of normalcy I hadn't experienced since before the stroke. She bustled in with a canvas tote bag over her arm, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual practical ponytail. Ready to break out of this joint? She asked cheerfully, setting the bag on my bed. I brought you some real clothes. Nothing against those glamorous hospital gowns, but I thought you might prefer something with, an actual back to it. I laughed. My first genuine laugh in weeks. Grace Wilson, you're a godsend. While a nurse helped me dress, Grace chatted about neighborhood happenings as if nothing had changed. Mrs. Peterson's dog had escaped again, the Wilsons were finally renovating their eyesore of a garage, and the community garden committee was in an uproar over someone's unauthorized Tomato trellis design. The ordinary, everyday dramas of life continued, stroke or no stroke. Leaving Pinewood was a mixture of emotions. Relief to be escaping the institutional setting, anxiety about managing at home, and determination to reclaim my independence. As Grace drove through Portland's familiar streets, I watched the city pass by with new appreciation. The stroke had given me an unexpected gift, a deeper awareness of life's fragility, and consequently, its value. When we pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see Raymond's car already parked there. My attorney stood on the front porch, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize. "Eleanor?" Raymond greeted me warmly as Grace helped me from the car. "Welcome home. This is Maria Gonzalez, the home health aide we discussed. She'll be with you 4 hours each day to start, adjustable as needed." Maria stepped forward with a professional but warm smile. "It's nice to meet you, Ms. Mitchell. I specialize in stroke recovery support." I extended my right hand, my stronger one. "Please call me Eleanor. I appreciate your help during this transition." Inside, I discovered that Raymond had indeed arranged everything as promised. The familiar bones of my home remained, but subtle modifications made it more accessible. Grab bars had been installed in the bathroom, a temporary bedroom had been set up on the ground floor, and a stairlift now followed the curved path of my staircase to the second floor. "The monitoring system is also active," Raymond explained, pointing out small, unobtrusive sensors throughout the main living areas. "If you fall or remain immobile for an extended period, it automatically alerts emergency services. There's also a medical alert pendant you can wear." I nodded, taking it all in. My independence would come with safeguards. A reasonable compromise. "Now," Raymond continued, checking his watch, "we should review the documents before your meeting with Daniel. Tonight. Maria, perhaps you could prepare some lunch while we talk. Eleanor needs to take her medication with food." Maria nodded and headed to the kitchen, already familiar with the layout. Grace squeezed my shoulder. "I'll leave you to your legal matters. I'm just next door if you need anything, day or night." She pointed a stern finger at me. "And I mean that. No stubborn independence if you're in trouble. You hear me?" After she left, Raymond and I settled in my study, the one room completely unchanged from before my stroke. The familiar surroundings, my desk, the wall of books, the view of my garden, centered me for what was to come. "Everything is prepared," Raymond confirmed, opening his briefcase. "As instructed, I've initiated the process to reveal Aurora, Investment's true ownership. The company bylaws give Daniel 30 days to respond once formal notice is served." I picked up the document he placed before me, scanning its legal language. "And this gives us control in the interim?" "Yes. As the majority investor, you have the right to call an emergency board meeting and propose temporary leadership changes, pending resolution." "I doubt it will come to that," I said, signing where he indicated. "Daniel is many things, but he's not a fool. Once he understands his position, he'll negotiate." Raymond looked troubled. "Eleanor, are you certain this is the path you want to take? Revealing yourself as Aurora now, using it as leverage against your son? There will be no going back." I set down my pen and met his concerned gaze. "Raymond, I've spent my entire life putting others first, my parents, my husband, my son. When I finally needed support, Daniel showed me exactly where I stand in his priorities. I'm not using Aurora as revenge. I'm using it to reclaim my dignity and independence." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But as your friend as well as your attorney, I must ask, what do you hope to achieve? What's your endgame here?" It was a fair question, one I had contemplated extensively during my rehabilitation. "Justice," I said finally. "Not punishment, but accountability. Daniel needs to understand that his actions have consequences. Beyond that," I sighed, "I honestly don't know. That depends on him." After Raymond left, Maria helped me settle in. She was efficient without being intrusive, helping me organize my medication schedule and demonstrating exercises I could do between formal therapy sessions. By late afternoon, she had departed with a promise to return the following morning. Alone in my house for the first time since the stroke, I felt both vulnerable and empowered. I made myself a cup of tea, a simple task that now required deliberate concentration, and carried it carefully to my favorite armchair by the front window. From there, I could watch the neighborhood and gather my thoughts before Daniel's arrival. At precisely 7 o'clock, his sleek electric sedan pulled into my driveway. Always punctual, one trait of mine he had inherited. I remained seated as he approached the door, letting him ring the bell rather than calling out for him to enter. This was no longer his childhood home where he could come and go freely. This was my territory. When I opened the door, I noticed his eyes widen slightly at my appearance. Perhaps he had expected to find me more diminished, more obviously affected by the stroke. Instead, I stood relatively steady, my speech clear if somewhat slower than before. "Mom," he greeted me uncertainly, "you look better." "Physical therapy works wonders," I replied, stepping aside to let him enter. "Come in." His gaze traveled around the house, noting the modifications. "So you really did have all this work done. How did you afford it?" "Let's discuss that in the study," I suggested, ignoring his question for now. "Would you like some coffee? I've just made a fresh pot." He followed me through the house, his discomfort palpable. In the study, he took the seat across from my desk rather than the more comfortable armchair, positioning himself as a business associate rather than a son. It was a telling choice. I settled behind my desk, a position of authority I had deliberately chosen. "You're wondering about Aurora Investments," I began, seeing no reason to delay the inevitable. Daniel leaned forward, his expression guarded. "You mentioned it on the phone. What about it?" "Aurora Investments," I said clearly, "is me." He blinked, confusion crossing his features. "What do you mean, is you?" "I mean exactly that. I am Aurora Investments, the shell corporation that provided your initial capital, that owns 40% of Innovate Northwest, that has been pushing for a board seat for the past 6 months. That's all me." Daniel's face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion giving way to disbelief, then shock, and finally something approaching horror. That's not possible. Aurora is a limited liability company registered in Delaware, with subsidiary holdings in the Cayman Islands, I finished for him. Initially funded through my personal accounts and later supplemented by my inheritance from Howard Blackwell. Currently valued at approximately $17 million, primarily due to my investment in your company. He shook his head, struggling to process this information. "But the Aurora representative I've been dealing with, Jenkins, works for Raymond's firm. He acts on my instructions." I opened my desk drawer and removed a folder, sliding it across to him. "Here's all the documentation you need to verify what I'm telling you. Articles of incorporation, transfer records, investment agreements, all bearing my signature as the beneficial owner." Daniel opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the documents inside. I watched as the reality of his situation dawned on him. His mother, the burden he had been so eager to discard, controlled nearly half of his company. "Why?" he finally asked, looking up with bewildered eyes. "Why the secrecy? Why not just tell me you were investing in my company?" "I explained my reasoning when you first approached me for funding. I wanted you to succeed on your own merits, without employees or competitors thinking you had an unfair advantage through family connections. I wanted you to feel the accomplishment was truly yours." I paused, letting my next words land with appropriate weight. "And I wanted to be valued as your mother, not your bankroll." Daniel flushed, the implications of his recent behavior clearly striking home. This is why you never seemed concerned about money, why you lived so modestly despite your career. I've always believed in living below my means and investing the difference, I confirmed. A principle I thought I had passed on to you. Apparently, I was mistaken. He set the folder down, his expression hardening. So what now? Is this some kind of threat? Blackmail? Be nice to Mom or she'll pull her investment? His defensive anger didn't surprise me, but it still stung. No, Daniel. This is simply me being transparent about my position, something you apparently value, given how quick you were to make decisions about my house and my care without my input. That was different. You had a stroke. We were concerned about your welfare. Were you? I asked quietly. Or were you concerned about the inconvenience I represented? Because from where I was lying, in a hospital bed, mind you, it seemed very much like the latter. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the small confines of the study. This isn't fair. You're taking one difficult moment, one emotional conversation, and using it to what? I interrupted. To protect myself? To ensure I maintain control over my own life? To prevent my son from selling my home out from under me and committing me to an institution against my wishes? My voice remained level, but I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. What exactly am I doing that's so unfair, Daniel? He stopped, pacing, his back to me as he stared out the window into the gathering dusk. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. You could have just told me you had money. You didn't need to deceive me like this. Would it have made a difference? I asked. If you had known about my wealth, would you still have called me a burden? Would you still have decided my house needed to be sold without consulting me? Would you still have made unilateral decisions about my future without respecting my wishes? Daniel turned to face me, his expression conflicted. I was trying to make practical decisions during a crisis. Maybe I was heavy-handed, but my intentions were good. Your intentions, I said carefully, included shipping me off to Evergreen, because you and Vanessa don't have room in your lives for this kind of disruption right now. Those were your exact words, Daniel. Don't pretend this was about my welfare. He had the grace to look ashamed, but his defensiveness quickly reasserted itself. So this is revenge, then? You're going to use your position as Aurora to punish me? I shook my head, disappointed that he still didn't understand. No, Daniel. This is a boundary. For the first time in our relationship, I'm prioritizing my needs over your convenience. I'm demonstrating that I won't be dismissed or devalued, even by my own son. What exactly do you want? He asked warily. I leaned back in my chair, feeling suddenly tired. The day had been long, and my still recovering body was protesting the emotional strain. Right now, I want 3 things. First, I want your word that you will make no further attempts to interfere with my living arrangements or healthcare decisions without my explicit consent. He nodded reluctantly. Fine, it's your life. Second, I want you to explain to Vanessa and anyone else you've involved that I am fully capable of managing my own affairs and will be recovering in my own home, on my own terms. Another nod, more grudging this time. And the third? I met his gaze steadily. I want you to think very carefully about what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Not with Aurora Investments. With me? Your mother? Because that relationship needs to be rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect, not convenience or financial benefit. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. You still want a relationship with me? After everything? You're my son, I said simply. That hasn't changed, despite recent events. But how we relate to each other needs to change fundamentally. He sank back into his chair, the defensive anger draining from his posture. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of the thoughtful boy he had once been, The one who would sit at this very desk puzzling through homework problems, determined to find solutions on his own. "What about Aurora?" he finally asked. "What are your plans there?" "That depends largely on you," I answered honestly. "As things stand, I've instructed Raymond to proceed with formalizing Aurora's board seat. I intend to attend quarterly meetings and have input on major strategic decisions, as any significant investor would expect. Beyond that, I have no plans to interfere with day-to-day operations. And if I object, then we enter a more complicated phase of our professional relationship," I said carefully. "One that might involve shareholder resolutions, proxy battles, and other mechanisms I would prefer to avoid. It would be unpleasant for everyone involved, particularly given that Aurora's position would likely be supported by other investors." Once the facts were known, Daniel winced. "You've thought this through." "I've had considerable time to contemplate my options," I replied mildly. "Rehabilitation involves many hours of mundane exercises. It leaves the mind free to problem solve." A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, streetlights flickered on as daylight faded. I could almost see Daniel processing everything, calculating angles, considering outcomes, the businessman's approach to a personal crisis. "I need time to think," he finally said. "This is a lot to absorb." I nodded. "Take whatever time you need. My position won't change." He rose to leave, pausing at the study door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for what I said at the hospital, about you being a burden. I was stressed and frustrated, but that's no excuse. It was cruel, and I regret it." It wasn't quite the heartfelt apology I might have hoped for, but it was a start. "Thank you for saying that," I acknowledged. "I hope in time you'll understand why it hurt so deeply." After Daniel left, I remained in my study for a long while, processing the confrontation. It had gone largely as expected. Initial shock, defensive anger, reluctant acceptance. What would come next remained uncertain. Would Daniel see this as an opportunity for genuine reconciliation, or would he simply adapt his approach to protect his business interests? Only time would tell. I made my way slowly upstairs using the new stair lift, familiarizing myself with its operation. My bedroom felt like a sanctuary after weeks in institutional settings. I settled onto my own mattress, surrounded by my own things, and experienced a profound sense of gratitude for this hard-won independence. The next morning brought new challenges. Simple tasks like showering and dressing took twice as long as before. My left hand still lacked the fine motor control needed for buttons and zippers. By the time Maria arrived at 9, I was exhausted, but determined not to show it. "First day home is always the hardest," she observed knowingly as she helped me organize my medication. "Your body is remembering all the movements it used to take for granted." We worked through my prescribed exercises together, Maria offering corrections to my technique when needed. She was professional but warm, treating me as a partner in my recovery rather than a patient to be managed. By the time she left at 1:00, I felt more confident in my ability to navigate my new reality. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang around 3, and I opened it to find Vanessa standing on my porch, her expression unreadable. "Eleanor," she greeted me stiffly. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, curious about this development. Daniel must have spoken to her about our conversation, but I couldn't gauge from her demeanor how she had taken the news. Vanessa followed me to the living room, perching awkwardly on the edge of the sofa as I settled into my armchair. She was dressed impeccably as always, her marketing executive persona firmly in place. "Daniel told me everything," she began without preamble. "About Aurora, about your true financial situation, about your conversation last night." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I have to admit, I'm surprised." She chose her words carefully, ever the communications professional. All this time, we thought that I was a modestly successful financial consultant living primarily on Social Security and a small retirement account. I finished for her. That was the impression I cultivated, yes. Vanessa's perfectly manicured fingers fidgeted with the strap of her designer handbag. Why would you live so below your means all these years? You could have had a much more comfortable lifestyle. The question revealed so much about her values. I was comfortable, Vanessa. I had everything I needed, a home I loved, work that fulfilled me, good health and family nearby. What more would another zero in my bank account have added to that? Happiness? She looked genuinely puzzled, as if trying to solve a particularly challenging equation. But the status, the security. I had both, I replied simply. My security came from knowing I was financially independent. My status came from being respected in my field and in my community. I never needed to broadcast my wealth. To feel valuable. Vanessa nodded slowly, though I could tell she didn't truly understand. In her world, worth was measured by visible markers of success. The house in West Hills, the luxury car, the exclusive private school for Tyler. The SAS concept of quiet wealth, of deliberate understatement, was foreign to her. So what happens now? She asked finally. With the company, I mean. Daniel was up all night worrying that you might take action. Aurora Investments will claim its board seat, as is its right, I replied. Beyond that, nothing changes, as long as the company continues to be well-managed and profitable. Relief visibly washed over her. And between you and Daniel? Between us as a family? That was the more complicated question, wasn't it? That depends on whether we can build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. I won't be treated as a burden or an inconvenience, Vanessa. Not by my son, not by you, not by anyone. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. We were trying to help in our way. You thought selling my home and moving me to Evergreen against my wishes was helping, I interrupted gently. But real help involves respecting someone's autonomy and supporting their preferences, not imposing your solutions regardless of their desires. Vanessa fell silent, contemplating this perspective. Finally, she asked, Have you told Tyler? About Aurora? No, that's Daniel's decision as his father. About your stroke, she clarified. He's been asking why he hasn't seen his grandmother. Daniel told him you were traveling. I frowned at this new deception. Tyler is 12, not 2. He deserves the truth, presented in an age-appropriate way. Children are remarkably resilient when adults are honest with them. Vanessa looked away. Daniel thought it would upset him. Daniel thought it would be inconvenient, I corrected her. Having to explain illness and mortality to a child is uncomfortable. Answering difficult questions is uncomfortable. But protecting Tyler from reality doesn't serve him. It only serves adult discomfort. You sound like my mother, Vanessa muttered, then looked mortified. I didn't mean... It's all right, I assured her, surprised to find myself smiling. Sometimes mothers are right, even when their advice is unwelcome. A moment of unexpected understanding passed between us. For all our differences, Vanessa and I shared the experience of being daughters who occasionally chafed under maternal wisdom, only to later recognize its value. Would you like to see Tyler? She asked suddenly. He has soccer practice until 5, but we could come by afterward. If you're up to it, she added hastily. The offer surprised me. I'd like that very much, I said sincerely. After Vanessa left, I realized something had shifted. Not dramatically, but perceptibly. She had arrived guarded and left thoughtful. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a recalibration. Tyler's visit that evening brought me more joy than I had experienced in weeks. Unlike his parents, He showed no discomfort with my condition. After a brief, serious examination of my face for signs of my stroke, he launched into an enthusiastic account of his soccer team's latest victory, his school science project, and the new video game he was saving his allowance to buy. "Grandma, do you know what's weird?" he asked as he helped me arrange chess, pieces on the board between us. "Dad said you were traveling, but Grace told me you were in the hospital. Why would Dad say that?" I glanced at Vanessa, who was sitting quietly in the corner checking emails on her phone. She looked up, her expression conflicted. "Your father was trying to protect you," I explained to Tyler. "Adults sometimes think children can't handle difficult news, so they avoid telling the whole truth." Tyler considered this as he made his eye-opening move. "But that's dumb. Not knowing is scarier than knowing. I thought maybe you were really sick, like dying or something." "I had a stroke," I told him honestly. "It affected the left side of my body and my speech for a while. I'm getting better with therapy, but I might always have some weakness or talk a bit slower than before." He nodded, accepting this information matter-of-factly. "My friend Jake's grandpa had a stroke. He walks with a cane now, but he still comes to all the soccer games." "I plan to come to your games too," I assured him, "though I might need to bring a folding chair for a while." "Cool." He made another move on the chessboard. "Hey, can I help with your therapy sometimes? Jake helped his grandpa with exercises and stuff." From the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa set down her phone, watching our interaction with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "I'd like that very much," I told Tyler. "The therapist gave me exercises I'm supposed to practice every day." He beamed, pleased to be included in my recovery. For the rest of the evening, we played chess, talked about his interests, and even did a few simple hand exercises together. When it was time for him to leave, he hugged me carefully, as if I might break. "I'm glad you're home, Grandma," he whispered. "Our family feels weird when you're not around." His innocent observation struck me deeply. Children often perceive emotional truths that adults miss or deny. In Tyler's world, I was an essential part of the family structure, not a burden or an inconvenience. Vanessa lingered after Tyler went out to the car. "Thank you," she said awkwardly, "for being honest with him. He's been worried, though he tried not to show it." "He's a remarkable boy," I replied. "You and Daniel are raising him well." She nodded, accepting the compliment. "Daniel wants to come by tomorrow, to talk more. Is that okay?" "Yes," I said. "Tell him I'll be here." After they left, I sat in the quiet house, reflecting on the day's developments. Nothing had been resolved, not really. The wounds inflicted by Daniel's words and actions remained raw. But something had shifted. Perspectives had been challenged, assumptions questioned. It wasn't healing, not yet, but perhaps it was the beginning of something new. That night, as I prepared for bed with the deliberate movements my condition now required, I thought about what true reconciliation might look like. Not a return to how things were before. That was impossible and perhaps undesirable. The relationship had been unbalanced, with me giving too much and expecting too little in return. No, reconciliation would need to be built on new terms, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. The question was whether Daniel could adapt to this new reality, not just professionally as the CEO dealing with Aurora Investments, but personally as a son reconnecting with his mother on more equal footing. His visit tomorrow would be the first indication of whether that was possible. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself strangely at peace, despite the uncertainty. For the first time in decades, I was prioritizing my own needs without guilt or hesitation. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, secure in my independence and clear about my worth. The stroke had taken things from me, certain physical capabilities, the illusion of invulnerability, but it had given me something valuable in return. The courage to stand firmly in my truth, regardless of the consequences. Morning would bring new challenges, new conversations, perhaps even new conflicts. But I would meet them as Eleanor Mitchell, not as Daniel's mother or Aurora's owner or the stroke patient in room 217. Just Eleanor, finally and fully herself. Daniel arrived precisely at 10 the next morning, carrying a bakery box and a bouquet of lilies. I recognized the gesture for what it was. An olive branch, perhaps, or at least an acknowledgement that our relationship required some repair. I invited him into the kitchen, where the morning light made everything seem more approachable, less formal than the study where we'd had our confrontation. "I brought your favorites," he said, opening the box to reveal almond croissants. "And coffee, though I wasn't sure if you're still allowed caffeine with your medications." "1 cup. A day is fine," I replied, touched despite myself by his remembering my preferences. "Thank you." We settled at the kitchen table, the pastries between us like a peace offering. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Daniel looked tired, with shadows beneath his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. "You look exhausted," I observed finally. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Turns out discovering your mother secretly controls almost half your company can affect your sleep patterns." I nodded, accepting the mild rebuke. "I imagine so." Daniel took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders slightly, a gesture I recognized from his childhood, something he did when steeling himself for a difficult conversation. "I've been thinking about everything you said, about why you kept Aurora's identity secret, about how I treated you after your stroke. I've been replaying our conversations in my head and—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. I don't like the person I hear in those memories. It was more self-awareness than I had expected. "Go on," I encouraged quietly. "The things I said to you, about being a burden, about not having room in our lives for your recovery, that's not who I want to be." His voice grew hesitant. "But I'm not sure I would have recognized how wrong those words were if you hadn't forced me to confront them through Aurora." I considered this, taking a small sip of coffee. "Perhaps. But I didn't reveal Aurora to teach you a lesson, Daniel. I did it to protect myself." "I know," he acknowledged. "That's what makes it worse. The fact that you felt you needed protection from your own son." He looked down at his untouched croissant. "It's made me question everything, not just about our relationship, but about who I've become." There was genuine pain in his voice, and for a moment I glimpsed the sensitive boy he had once been, before ambition and Vanessa's family's expectations had reshaped him. But I reminded myself that momentary regret wasn't the same as lasting change. "What have you concluded?" I asked neutrally. Daniel met my gaze directly. "That I've lost perspective. That I've been measuring success in stock valuations and quarterly projections instead of human connections. That somewhere along the way I started viewing everything and everyone in terms of their utility or inconvenience to my goals." He swallowed hard, including my own mother. The admission hung in the air between us. I waited, giving him space to continue. "I'm not making excuses," he said after a moment. "But I want you to understand where I am coming from. Innovate Northwest is at a critical juncture. We're negotiating a major government contract that could triple our valuation. If we secure it, we'll be positioned to go public within 18 months. The stress has been intense." "I understand pressure, Daniel," I replied gently. "I built my career in finance during an era when women were barely tolerated in the industry. I raised you largely alone while working full-time. I managed your father's end-of-life care while still maintaining my client portfolio. Stress doesn't justify cruelty." He winced, but nodded. "You're right, and that's what it was. Cruelty. Wrapped in pragmatism and rationalization, but cruelty nonetheless." He pushed his coffee cup aside. "I keep thinking about what you said, about wanting me to think carefully about what kind of relationship we might have going forward. I've been asking myself the same question, and I realized something important. What's that? I don't want a relationship with Aurora Investments. I want a relationship with my mother. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. If that's still possible? The vulnerability in his expression reminded me powerfully of the little boy who'd come to me with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting that I could make things right. But we weren't in that simple parent-child dynamic anymore. Too much had happened. Too many harsh words had been spoken. It's possible, I said carefully, but it can't be the relationship we had before. That dynamic wasn't healthy for either of us. What would a healthy relationship look like to you? He asked, and I was struck by the genuine inquiry in his tone. I considered the question thoughtfully. One where my autonomy is respected, where my preferences matter, where I'm not expected to sacrifice endlessly without reciprocation, where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide. Daniel nodded slowly. And from my side? From your side? It would mean examining why you were so quick to discard me when I became inconvenient. It would mean recognizing that relationships aren't transactional. They're commitments that endure through difficulty. It would mean learning to give as generously as you've received. He absorbed this, his expression somber. That's fair. More than fair, given how I've behaved. He hesitated, then added, I've talked to Tyler. Really talked to him about your stroke, about how I handled it. He was disappointed in me. That surprised me. You discussed this with your son? Yes, after seeing how naturally he connected with you yesterday, how honest and supportive he was. Daniel shook his head ruefully. It made me realize I've been underestimating him, treating him like he needs to be sheltered from reality rather than guided through it. When I explained what had happened, how I'd suggested you move to assisted living against your wishes, he looked at me like I was a stranger. The pain in Daniel's voice was real, but so was the growth it represented. Children often have a clearer moral compass than adults, I observed. They haven't learned to rationalize selfishness yet. He asked me if I would send him away if he got sick. Daniel continued quietly. It was like a knife to the heart. I couldn't even answer him. I felt a surge of protectiveness toward Tyler, even as I recognized the valuable lesson he had taught. His father. What did you tell him? That I had made a terrible mistake. That sometimes adults get so caught up in solving problems that they forget to consider other people's feelings. That I was going to work very hard to make things right with you, if you'd let me. It was more self-reflection than I'd heard from Daniel in years. Perhaps the shock of discovering my role as Aurora had penetrated his defenses in a way that mere confrontation couldn't have. And what about Vanessa? I asked. Where does she stand in all this? Daniel sighed. She's processing. The financial implications of Aurora's identity have her attention, certainly. But I think your conversation with her yesterday affected her more than she's willing to admit. She mentioned something about perspectives and autonomy when we got home. I nodded, unsurprised. Vanessa was nothing if not adaptable. Whether that adaptation would extend to genuine empathy remained to be seen. So where do we go from here? Daniel asked, finally taking a bite of his croissant. Slowly, I replied. One step at a time. I'm still recovering physically, and our relationship needs similar rehabilitation, gradual strengthening, patience, occasional setbacks. I'd like to be part of your recovery, he offered. Not taking over or making decisions for you, but supporting you, if you'd allow it. It was a start, a small one, but significant nonetheless. I'd welcome that, I said. Maria comes in the mornings, but having family check in regularly would be helpful. Daniel nodded, relief visible in his expression. Thank you for giving me another chance. It's not unconditional, I cautioned. I need to see consistent change, not just momentary remorse. I understand, he assured me. I know I have a lot to prove. As Daniel prepared to leave, he paused in the hallway. About Aurora. What happens now, professionally speaking? Will you be attending board meetings as yourself or through Jenkins? It was a fair question, one with significant implications for both of us. I think it's time Aurora had a face, I decided. I'll attend the quarterly meeting next month. It will give us time to prepare the other board members and investors for the revelation. Daniel looked apprehensive but nodded. I'll work with Raymond to draft an appropriate announcement. We should coordinate our messaging carefully to minimize market disruption. Always the CEO, I observed with a small smile. He had the grace to look sheepish. Sorry, old habits. After Daniel left, I felt emotionally drained but cautiously optimistic. His remorse seemed genuine, his self-reflection substantive. Yet I reminded myself that one conversation didn't erase the harm of his previous words and actions. Trust, once broken, required more than apologies to rebuild. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. My mornings began with Maria's assistance, followed by exercises and often a therapy appointment. Daniel called daily and visited every other day, sometimes bringing Tyler for a chess game or to help with my hand exercises. Vanessa came less frequently but made a point of including me in weekend family dinners, either by having me over or bringing food to my house. These dinners were initially awkward affairs, with conversation carefully skirting controversial topics. But gradually, a new dynamic emerged. Vanessa stopped treating me as an invalid to be managed and began engaging with me as a person with valid perspectives. Daniel became more attentive to my preferences without attempting to override my decisions. And Tyler, wonderful, resilient Tyler, simply accepted my condition as another facet of his grandmother, neither defining nor limiting me. 4 weeks after leaving Pinewood, I felt strong enough to accompany Daniel to Innovate Northwest's headquarters in Seattle. The purpose was twofold: to prepare key executives for Aurora's upcoming revelation and to see firsthand the company my investment had helped build. The Innovate Northwest campus was impressive, 3 sleek buildings of glass and sustainable materials, surrounded by thoughtfully landscaped grounds featuring native plants. Solar panels covered every roof, and electric vehicle charging stations filled the parking area. It was a physical manifestation of Daniel's vision. Progressive, environmentally conscious, forward-thinking. "What do you think?" Daniel asked. As he guided me through the main lobby, his pride evident. "It's remarkable," I replied honestly. "You've created something special here." He beamed at the praise. "Let me show you the research labs. That's where the real magic happens." As we toured the facility, I was struck by the respect employees showed Daniel. It wasn't fear or mere deference to authority. It was genuine admiration. They believed in his vision and valued his leadership. Whatever his failings as a son, he had succeeded spectacularly as a CEO. In the afternoon, we met with Jason Cooper, Daniel's co-founder and CFO, along with the company's legal counsel. They were the only executives who would be informed of Aurora's true identity before the board meeting. Jason's reaction to the news was comically similar to Daniel's initial response: shock, disbelief, then a dawning recognition of the implications. "You're Aurora?" he repeated, staring at me with new eyes. "The entire time? Even when we launched the Series C funding round and nearly went under?" I nodded. "I've believed in this company from the beginning, even when others didn't." Jason shook his head in amazement. "We would have failed without Aurora's additional investment during that period. You saved us." "The company saved itself," I corrected him. "I simply provided the runway for you to solve the technical problems." The legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Stephanie Walsh, was more focused on the practicalities. "We'll need to file amended disclosures with the SEC," she noted, making rapid notes. And prepare a statement for the other investors before the quarterly meeting. Timing is critical here. Daniel nodded agreement. We want to control the narrative completely. No leaks, no rumors. And what is that narrative exactly? Stephanie asked, looking between Daniel and me. Why reveal Aurora's identity now, after all these years of secrecy? It was a perceptive question, getting to the heart of potential market concerns. Daniel glanced at me, clearly unsure how to frame the revelation without revealing the personal conflict that had precipitated it. 2 reasons, I said smoothly. First, my recent health challenges have made me reevaluate my approach to legacy planning. Remaining anonymous no longer serves my long-term financial objectives. Second, as Innovate Northwest approaches the possibility of going public, transparency becomes increasingly important. Better to reveal Aurora's identity now, on our terms, than have it emerge during the IPO due diligence process. Stephanie nodded approvingly at this framing. That makes sense. We can work with that narrative. After the meeting, Daniel escorted me to a private office where I could rest before our dinner reservation. You handled that perfectly, he said as I settled onto a comfortable sofa. Stephanie would have picked apart any hint of personal conflict between us. I've been in business a long time, Daniel, I reminded him. I know how to protect corporate interests while navigating personal complexities. He nodded, looking thoughtful. It's strange. I've always respected your financial acumen. That's why I came to you for initial funding. But somehow I still managed to underestimate you all these years. Because you saw me primarily as your mother, not as a financial strategist in my own right, I suggested. It's a common blindness children have toward their parents. They struggle to see them as complete human beings with identities beyond parenthood. Daniel considered this. You're right. Even knowing your professional background, I still thought of that as secondary to your role in my life. He smiled ruefully. Quite self-centered of me. It's natural, I assured him. But part of growing up is recognizing your parents as people with their own complex lives and identities. I'm learning that lesson rather late, he admitted. We dined that evening at a small, elegant restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. We waited for our meals. Daniel brought up a subject we had carefully avoided until now. What will you do with your Aurora holdings once everything is public? He asked, trying to sound casual but not quite managing it. Will you maintain your investment at current levels? I recognized the real question beneath his inquiry. Was I planning to use my financial leverage to control or punish him? Would I threaten to sell my shares if he displeased me personally? Aurora Investments will continue to support Innovate Northwest as it has from the beginning, I assured him. My personal relationship with you and my professional assessment of the company remain separate considerations. He looked relieved but still uncertain. And the board seat? Will you take it yourself or continue to work through Jenkins? I'll take it myself, I decided. Now that my health is improving, I'd like to be more directly involved. Not in day-to-day operations, of course, but in strategic planning and governance. Daniel nodded, absorbing this information. The other board members will be surprised, but I think ultimately supportive. Your financial background will be seen as an asset. Speaking of the board, I said, shifting to a related concern, have you considered how David Weiss might react to this revelation? David Weiss was Innovate Northwest's second-largest investor after Aurora, holding about 15% of the company. He had been pushing for more influence over strategic direction for years, often clashing with Daniel's vision. Daniel grimaced. Weiss will try to use this to his advantage somehow. He'll paint it as nepotism, suggest that my leadership position was secured through family connections rather than merit. Exactly, I agreed, which is why we need to anticipate and neutralize that narrative before he can establish it. How do you suggest we do that? I had been considering this question since deciding to reveal Aurora's identity. Transparency about the original arrangement. We emphasized that Aurora's investment came with the explicit condition that its identity remains secret, specifically to prevent perceptions of nepotism. We frame it as a successful strategy that allowed you to establish your leadership based solely on performance, without the shadow of family wealth. Daniel looked impressed. That actually turns the potential criticism into a strength. Additionally, I continued, we should prepare a comprehensive analysis of the company's growth under your leadership, with metrics that clearly demonstrate value creation independent of Aurora's investment. We spent the remainder of dinner strategizing about the upcoming board meeting, our conversation flowing easily into familiar financial and strategic territory. For the first time since my stroke, we were engaging as equals, each bringing valuable perspective to the discussion. It felt like the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than traditional parent-child dynamics. The following morning, before flying back to Portland, I met privately with Jason Cooper. Daniel had suggested the meeting, believing Jason might offer insights he wouldn't share with his co-founder present. We met in a small conference room, overlooking the campus. Jason seemed slightly nervous, perhaps unsure of my agenda. Daniel speaks highly of your financial oversight, I began, putting him at ease. He credits you with maintaining fiscal discipline during the company's rapid growth. Jason relaxed visibly. I try to be the voice of caution to balance his visionary tendencies. It's worked well for us. And how has he been recently? I asked. As a leader, a colleague, a friend? Jason considered the question carefully. Honestly? He's been stressed to the breaking point for months. This government contract negotiation is make or break for our growth trajectory, and Daniel's taken the weight of it almost entirely on his shoulders. That sounds like him, I observed, taking on too much responsibility, internalizing pressure. Exactly, Jason agreed. But something's shifted in the past few weeks. He's more, centered? He's delegating more effectively, seeking input instead of bulldozing ahead. He even took a weekend off last month, which has literally never happened in the 10 years I've known him. I nodded, encouraged by this external validation of the changes I'd observed in Daniel. And how much does the company rely on him personally? If he needed to step back temporarily, could Innovate Northwest function effectively? Jason looked surprised by the question. Are you asking if he's replaceable? I'm asking about organizational resilience, I clarified. Every company should be able to weather temporary leadership transitions. In that case, yes, we could manage, Jason confirmed. We have strong team leaders and clear protocols. It wouldn't be ideal during this critical phase, but we wouldn't collapse. He paused, studying me. Is there something I should know about Daniel's health or plans? No, I assured him. I'm simply doing my due diligence as Aurora prepares to take a more active board role. Understanding succession planning and organizational structure is part of that responsibility. Jason nodded, though he still looked slightly suspicious. Well, from where I stand, Daniel is irreplaceable in terms of vision and external relationships. But we've built a company that could function without him if necessary, as any well-structured organization should. That was precisely what I needed to hear. The company Daniel had built had integrity beyond his personal involvement. It wasn't a house of cards dependent on his constant attention, but a sustainable enterprise with solid foundations. When I returned to Portland that afternoon, I found Maria waiting with unexpected news. Your doctor called, she informed me as she helped me settle my travel bag. They've moved your follow-up appointment to tomorrow morning. Something about wanting to discuss your latest test results. A flutter of anxiety passed through me. Did they say why? Maria shook her head. Only that Dr. Patel wants to see you promptly at 9. I spent an uneasy evening wondering about this sudden change. My recovery had been progressing well, better than expected, according to my therapists. But stroke recovery was notoriously unpredictable, with improvements and setbacks coming in waves rather than steady progression. The next morning, Daniel insisted on accompanying me to the appointment, despite my assurances that I could manage alone. "I want to be there," he said, firmly, "no matter what the news is." Dr. Patel greeted us with her usual calm efficiency, gesturing for us to take seats in her office rather than an examination room. That alone told me this wasn't a routine follow-up. "Ms. Mitchell," she began, opening a folder containing my test. "Results. I've been reviewing your latest scans and blood work. There's something we need to discuss." Daniel tensed beside me, but I kept my expression neutral. "Go on, doctor." "Your recovery from the stroke has been exceptional. You've regained nearly 80% function in your affected side, which is remarkable given the severity of the initial event." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "However, the blood tests show some concerning markers that weren't related to the stroke itself. We ran additional tests, and I'm afraid we've identified a separate issue." My stomach tightened. "What kind of issue?" "You have stage 3 chronic lymphocytic leukemia," Dr. Patel said gently. "It's a slow-growing cancer of the blood and bone marrow. The symptoms can be subtle: fatigue, enlarged lymph nodes, night sweats, and are often attributed to other conditions or simply to aging. In your case, we likely wouldn't have caught it this early if not for the comprehensive testing after your stroke." The word cancer seemed to hover in the air, heavy and ominous. Beside me, Daniel had gone completely still. "What's the prognosis?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "CLL is generally not curable, but it is highly treatable," Dr. Patel explained. "Many patients live for decades with proper management. Given your otherwise good health and the fact that you're relatively young for this diagnosis at 62, I'm optimistic about your prospects." "And the treatment?" Daniel asked, finding his voice at last. "We have several options," Dr. Patel replied, turning to a new page in her notes. "For someone at Ms. Mitchell's stage and with her specific markers, I would recommend a targeted therapy approach rather than traditional chemotherapy, at least initially. The side effects are generally less severe, and the response rates are excellent." She continued explaining treatment protocols, survival statistics, and management strategies, but I found my attention drifting. Another health crisis, just as I was regaining my footing from the stroke. Just as my relationship with Daniel was healing. Just as I was preparing to take my rightful place at Aurora. The timing seemed cruelly ironic. "Mom?" Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts. "Dr. Patel asked if you have any questions." I refocused, meeting the doctor's concerned gaze. "How will this affect my stroke recovery?" "That's an excellent question," she acknowledged. "The treatments I'm recommending shouldn't significantly impede your rehabilitation. You may experience increased fatigue, which might require adjusting your therapy schedule, but will coordinate closely with your rehabilitation team to balance both conditions optimally." "And when would treatment begin?" I asked. "I'd like to start within the next 2 weeks, after we've completed a few more specialized tests to determine the exact molecular profile of your CLL. That will help us choose the most effective targeted therapy." As we left the office with a folder of information and follow-up appointments scheduled with an oncologist, I felt Daniel's steadying hand on my elbow. He hadn't spoken since we'd thanked Dr. Patel and left her office. "Are you all right?" I asked him once we were in the car. He looked at me incredulously. "Am I all right? You just received a cancer diagnosis and you're asking if I'm all right?" "You seem shocked," I observed. "Of course I'm shocked." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Just when you're recovering from one life-threatening condition. Now it's not fair." The genuine anguish in his voice touched me deeply. This wasn't the calculating CEO worried about a key investor's health. This was a son fearing for his mother's life. Life rarely distributes challenges fairly, I said gently. But Dr. Patel seemed optimistic about treatment outcomes. Daniel nodded, visibly trying to compose himself. You're right. And we have resources. The best doctors, cutting-edge treatments, whatever you need. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I cautioned. One step at a time, remember? First, we complete the additional testing. Then we develop a treatment plan. Then we adjust as needed. He glanced at me, a hint of admiration breaking through his concern. How are you so calm about this? I considered the question seriously. I've spent my life analyzing risk and planning for contingencies. This is just another problem to solve, another challenge to navigate. I paused, then added more softly. And perhaps having already faced one mortality check this year has given me perspective. The stroke could have killed me instantly. Instead, I've been given time. Time to heal relationships, time to put my affairs in order, time to live with intention. Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes suspiciously bright. I'm not ready to lose you. You're not losing me, I assured him. I fully intend to follow doctor's orders and fight this effectively, but we should be realistic about what we're facing. I touched his arm gently, and perhaps see this as an opportunity as well as a challenge. An opportunity? He sounded incredulous. To continue the work we've begun, rebuilding our relationship, redefining our roles in each other's lives, to make certain nothing is left unsaid or unresolved between us. I smiled slightly. And professionally, to ensure Innovate Northwest is positioned for success, regardless of Aurora's active involvement. Understanding dawned in his expression. That's why you were asking Jason about organizational resilience. Partly, I acknowledged, though it was a legitimate question from a major investor in any case. When we arrived back at my house, Daniel hesitated before leaving. Would you like me to stay? Or call Vanessa to come over? You shouldn't be alone right now. I'm not alone, I reminded him. Maria will be here until 1, and Grace checks in regularly. But thank you for offering. He nodded, clearly reluctant to leave but respecting my preference. I'll call you tonight and we can discuss next steps. And Mom? His voice grew more serious. This changes nothing about Aurora's role in the company. Please don't worry about that. I appreciated the reassurance, though I knew the reality would be more complicated. A major investor with cancer would inevitably raise concerns among other shareholders, especially as we approached a potential IPO. But those were problems for another day. After Daniel left, I sat in my garden, allowing myself to fully process the morning's news. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as I had reasserted my independence, my body had betrayed me with another reminder of human fragility. Yet I refused to see this diagnosis as a defeat. It was a challenge, certainly, but one I would face with the same determination I'd brought to every other obstacle in my life. The cancer might change my timeline, might alter my plans, might even eventually take my life. But it would not define me, would not dictate my choices, would not rob me of agency. I had fought too hard to reclaim my voice after the stroke, to surrender it now to fear or self-pity. As the afternoon sun warmed my face, I made a decision. I would proceed exactly as planned with the Aurora Revelation and board meeting. I would begin treatment as recommended, adjusting my schedule as needed but not withdrawing from life. And I would continue rebuilding my relationship with Daniel and his family, knowing that connection was more important now than ever. Whatever time I had left, months, years, decades, would be lived on my terms, with clarity about what truly mattered. The stroke had begun that lesson. Perhaps the cancer was meant to complete it. The week leading up to the Innovate Northwest. Board meeting was a blur of medical appointments and strategic planning. My new oncologist, Dr. Levine, confirmed Dr. Patel's assessment and recommended a targeted therapy drug that had shown promising results in patients with my specific genetic markers. We scheduled treatment to begin 3 days after the board meeting, giving me time to handle the professional matters before focusing on the medical ones. Raymond and Daniel worked tirelessly to prepare the necessary documentation and messaging strategy for the Aurora revelation. We held several preparatory sessions at my house, fine-tuning our approach for every possible scenario and stakeholder reaction. Through it all, I was struck by Daniel's attentiveness, not just to the business implications, but to my energy levels and comfort. He insisted on taking breaks when he noticed my fatigue, brought healthy meals developed with input from my new nutritionist, and never once suggested postponing the board meeting despite my dual health challenges. "Are you sure you're up to this?" he asked the evening before we were due to fly to Seattle. We had just finished reviewing our presentation materials, and I was noticeably tired. The board would understand if we rescheduled. And give David Weiss more time to hear rumors and form his own narrative? "No," I replied firmly. "Better to proceed as planned." Daniel nodded, accepting my decision without argument. A small but significant change from his previous tendency to override my preferences. "I've arranged for the company jet tomorrow. It'll be more comfortable than commercial, and we can use the flight time for any final preparations." The luxury of private air travel was something I rarely indulged in, despite my wealth. But in this instance, I appreciated the consideration. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He smiled slightly. "It's the least I can do. You're taking on a lot, especially considering." He trailed off, still uncomfortable directly referencing my cancer diagnosis. "My health challenges?" I supplied. "Daniel, we can't tiptoe around the word cancer. It's a medical condition, not a death sentence. At least not an immediate one." He winced but nodded. "You're right. I'm still adjusting to the idea, but I admire your approach, facing it head-on without letting it derail your plans." "I've never been one to hide from reality," I reminded him. "And pretending something isn't happening doesn't make it go away. Better to acknowledge it and incorporate it into our planning. Like we're doing with the board meeting," he observed. "Exactly. Speaking of which," I reached for the folder containing our presentation materials. "I think we should add a clear statement about my health status and treatment plan. Transparency from the beginning will prevent speculation and rumors." Daniel looked concerned. "Are you sure? You're not obligated to disclose personal medical information." "I'm not obligated, no. But it's the pragmatic approach. Board members and investors will have legitimate questions about Aurora's long-term involvement given my health. Better to address those questions directly than leave them to fester." Reluctantly, he agreed, and we drafted a brief, factual addendum to our presentation. My diagnosis, prognosis, favorable, treatment plan, and anticipated impact on my board participation, minimal. No emotional language, no request for sympathy, just the information stakeholders needed to make informed decisions. The flight to Seattle the next morning was smooth and productive. We used the time to role-play potential challenging questions from board members, particularly David Weiss, who we anticipated would be the most aggressive in his questioning. By the time we landed, I felt as prepared as possible for what promised to be a pivotal meeting in both our lives. Innovate Northwest's boardroom occupied the top floor of the main building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Seattle's skyline and Elliott Bay beyond. It was designed to impress, and it succeeded. The 12-person conference table was crafted from reclaimed timber, a nod to the company's environmental ethos. State-of-the-art presentation technology was seamlessly integrated into the space. Board members arrived gradually, exchanging pleasantries and helping themselves to coffee from a sideboard. Daniel made a point of introducing me to each one, carefully using my name only, "Eleanor Mitchell, my mother." with no mention yet of Aurora. I could see curiosity in their eyes, confusion about my presence at what was typically a closed meeting. David Weiss arrived last, striding in with the confidence of a man who believed his time was more valuable than others. He was tall, expensively dressed, with the sharp features and calculating gaze of someone perpetually seeking advantage. He paused momentarily when he saw me, then approached with a practiced smile. "Ms. Mitchell, isn't it? Daniel's mother?" He extended his hand. "David Weiss. I don't believe we've had the pleasure." "Not formally," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Though I've followed your career with interest, Mr. Weiss." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Why would Daniel's mother be following his career? But he masked it quickly. "All good things, I hope." "Informative," I replied neutrally, allowing him to interpret that as he wished. Daniel called the meeting to order precisely at 10. After handling routine business matters, he reached the agenda item simply labeled Aurora Investments Update. "As you all know," he began, "Aurora Investments has been our primary backer since Innovate Northwest's founding. They currently hold 40% of the company and have maintained a deliberately low profile while providing consistent financial support during critical growth phases." Board members nodded. This was all common knowledge. "What you don't know," Daniel continued, "is Aurora's true identity." He paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. "For strategic reasons that I'll explain shortly, Aurora's ownership has been confidential, known only to me and more recently to Jason and our legal team." David Weiss leaned forward, his interest visibly piqued. "Are you finally going to tell us who's been bankrolling this company all these years?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. As we approach a potential IPO, full transparency becomes increasingly important. Additionally, Aurora has expressed interest in taking a more active role in governance through direct board participation rather than continued proxy representation." Weiss's eyes narrowed. "And this mysterious benefactor is Daniel." Turned to me, offering a small nod. This was my moment. "I am Aurora Investments," I stated simply, meeting the surprised gazes around the table. "I have been since the company's inception." A stunned silence fell over the room, quickly broken by a barking laugh from Weiss. "You, Daniel's mother? You expect us to believe you've been the mysterious power behind Aurora all this time?" "It's not a matter of belief, Mr. Weiss," I replied calmly. "It's a matter of fact, as the documentation we're distributing now will confirm." Raymond, present as Aurora's legal representative, began passing folders to each board member. "Let me understand this," said Catherine Alvarez, a shrewd venture capitalist who had joined the board during the Series B funding round. "You provided the initial $3 million in startup capital, plus additional investments during critical phases, all while maintaining complete anonymity? Why?" "To protect the company's reputation and Daniel's leadership position," I explained. "If it had been known from the beginning that Innovate Northwest was funded by the CEO's mother, it would have created the perception of nepotism, that Daniel's position was secured through family connections rather than merit." "So you deliberately concealed your identity to allow the company to be judged on its own merits," summarized James Takahashi, another board member, "and to allow Daniel to establish his leadership without the shadow of family wealth." "Precisely," I confirmed. "It was a strategy that served its purpose. Innovate Northwest has thrived based on innovation and execution, not family connections or inherited advantage." Board members flipped through the documentation, examining the evidence of Aurora's identity and investment history. I could see them processing this revelation, recalculating power dynamics, considering implications. "This is extraordinary," Catherine finally said. "Not illegal, certainly, but highly unusual." "And now you want a direct board seat after all these years of operating through proxies?" "Yes, for two primary reasons." I leaned forward slightly, maintaining a calm, authoritative posture. First, as the company approaches potential public offering, increased transparency and governance oversight become essential. Second, and I believe in full disclosure, I've recently experienced health challenges that have prompted me to reevaluate my approach to legacy planning and direct involvement in my investments. Weiss's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. Health challenges? What kind of health challenges? I had anticipated this question and was prepared to address it directly. I suffered a stroke approximately 2 months ago, from which I'm recovering. Well, during the comprehensive testing that followed, doctors also diagnosed me with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, a treatable, though not curable, form of blood cancer. Another silence fell, this one tinged with discomfort. Most board members looked unsure how to respond to such personal information in a business context. I'm sharing this not to solicit sympathy, I continued smoothly, but because it constitutes material information for board members to consider when evaluating Aurora's current and future role. My treatments begin next week. My doctors anticipate minimal disruption to my professional activities, but full transparency requires acknowledging this reality. Catherine nodded appreciatively at my directness. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Mitchell. May I ask what your long-term intentions are regarding your Aurora holdings, given these health considerations? My investment strategy remains unchanged, I assured her. I believe deeply in Innovate Northwest's mission and potential. I have no plans to divest or reduce Aurora's position. In fact, I've established clear directives ensuring continued support regardless of my personal health outcomes. This seemed to satisfy most of the board members, who relaxed visibly. But Weiss was not so easily appeased. This is all very touching, he said, his tone suggesting it was anything but it raises serious governance concerns. We have a CEO whose primary investor is his mother, who now wants direct board influence despite serious health issues. How can shareholders be confident that corporate decisions aren't being made based on family dynamics rather than business logic? It was precisely the line of attack we had anticipated. Before Daniel could respond, I addressed Weiss directly. Your concern would be valid if our relationship had been concealed from the board. But that's precisely why we're making this disclosure now, before any public offering. As for family dynamics influencing business decisions, I smiled slightly. I assure you, Mr. Weiss, my investment decisions have always been based on financial merit, not maternal sentiment. Easy to claim, Weiss countered. Impossible to prove. The fact remains that you've been operating in secrecy all these years and now suddenly want transparency? The timing is suspicious, especially with these health issues emerging. Daniel tensed beside me, but I placed a subtle hand on his arm. I had dealt with men like Weiss throughout my career, men who mistook aggression for strength, who used intimidation as a negotiating tactic. Let me be clear, Mr. Weiss, I said, my voice level but firm. Aurora's identity was concealed for strategic business purposes with the knowledge and approval of legal counsel. At no point were securities regulations violated. As for the timing, yes. Health considerations have accelerated our timeline for disclosure. That's not suspicious. It's prudent governance. Catherine Alvarez nodded in agreement. I see no impropriety here. Unusual, yes, but not improper. The question now is how we integrate this new information into our governance structure moving forward, particularly as we prepare for public offering. The discussion shifted to practical considerations: board composition, voting structures, disclosure requirements for potential investors. Throughout, I presented Aurora's position clearly and confidently, demonstrating the same financial acumen that had built my career. By the time we broke for lunch, most board members appeared to have accepted the revelation and moved on to its practical implications. Only Weiss remained visibly disgruntled, cornering Daniel near the refreshment table while I was engaged with other board members. This changes everything, I overheard him saying tersely. Family money controlling a company headed for IPO? The market will hate it. Your mother on the board with one foot in the grave. It creates uncertainty no investor wants. Daniel's response was measured but firm. My mother's health prognosis is excellent and her financial expertise is unquestionable. If anything, having Aurora's identity known and its founder directly involved strengthens our governance heading into public offering. You're delusional, Weiss scoffed. This reeks of nepotism and instability. I'm going to recommend my fund reduce its position before this news hits the market. I approached then, deliberately interrupting their tense exchange. Mr. Weiss, I understand your concerns as a significant investor. Perhaps we should discuss them directly rather than through Daniel. Weiss turned to me, momentarily startled by my directness. Ms. Mitchell. Yes, frankly, I have serious reservations about this arrangement. Which specific aspect troubles you most? I asked calmly. The historical anonymity, the family connection, or my health status? He blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct question. All of it creates an impression of impropriety and instability. Impression, not reality, I noted. The facts show consistent strategic investment supporting exponential growth. As for stability, I met his gaze. Steadily. Aurora has never wavered in its support. Unlike some investors who threatened to pull funding during the technical challenges 3 years ago. Weiss flushed slightly. He had indeed been among those threatening to withdraw during a difficult development phase. That was a legitimate response to project delays. It was a short-sighted reaction to expected R&D challenges in an innovative field, I corrected him, which is why Aurora stepped in with additional funding to bridge the gap. Our patient capital approach has been vindicated by subsequent developments, wouldn't you agree? He had no effective response, since Innovate Northwest's value had quadrupled since that crisis. The past is irrelevant. It's future stability I'm concerned with, given your condition. My condition, as you put it, doesn't affect Aurora's financial position or commitment. But your threatened divestment based on optics rather than fundamentals, that creates precisely the market instability you claim to fear. I kept my tone conversational, though my meaning was unmistakable. Perhaps we should focus on facts, rather than impressions. Weiss recognized he was outmatched in this exchange. He muttered something about considering all perspectives, and moved away to speak with other board members. Daniel looked at me with undisguised admiration. That was masterful. Basic negotiation strategy, I replied modestly. Address the stated concern while highlighting the inconsistency in the underlying position. He'll be a problem going forward, Daniel warned. Yes, but a manageable one. He's too invested to divest without significant loss, and too concerned with his reputation to act on emotion alone. I sipped my water thoughtfully. He'll bluster and threaten, but ultimately adapt to the new reality. The afternoon session proceeded more smoothly, focusing on operational updates and strategic planning for the upcoming government contract bid. By meeting's end, the board had formally acknowledged Aurora's identity, approved my appointment to fill Aurora's board seat, and established a governance committee to address any potential conflicts of interest. Standard practice for family-connected businesses. As board members departed, most made a point of speaking with me personally, expressing both professional respect and personal well wishes for my health challenges. Even Weiss managed a stiff but civil goodbye. Only Catherine Alvarez lingered, until the others had left. Eleanor, she said, using my first name for the first time, I'm genuinely impressed. Not just by your investment strategy, which has been brilliant, but by how you've handled this revelation. She glanced toward Daniel, who was conferring with Jason across the room. He's lucky to have you in his corner, professionally and personally. Thank you, Catherine. That means a great deal coming from someone with your experience. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Between us, I've had my doubts about Daniel over the years. Brilliant, certainly, but sometimes too rigid, too focused on his vision to hear other perspectives. I've seen a change in him these past months, though. More measured, more willing to collaborate. Would I be right in thinking that coincides with your more direct involvement? It was an insightful observation. Perhaps we've had cause to reevaluate our relationship recently, both personal and professional. Growth often comes from challenging circumstances. She nodded understandingly. Well, whatever the catalyst, it suits him. And the company. She squeezed my arm gently. Take care of your health, Eleanor. The board needs your perspective. After Catherine left, Daniel approached, visibly relieved now that the challenging day was behind us. You were incredible. Every board member I spoke with was impressed with your poise and strategic thinking. Even Weiss? I asked with a small smile. Well, he called you formidable, which from him is practically a compliment. Daniel gathered his papers, his expression growing more serious. Are you tired? We should get you back to the hotel to rest before dinner. I assessed my energy levels honestly. The day had been demanding, but I'd paced myself carefully. I'm tired, but not depleted. Let's gather Jason and Stephanie for a brief debrief first, then head back. The four of us met in Daniel's office, reviewing the meeting outcomes and next steps. Stephanie would prepare formal documentation of my board appointment, while Jason would develop messaging for key investors not present at the meeting. Daniel would coordinate with the public relations team to prepare for eventual wider disclosure, though we agreed to delay any public announcement until after my treatment was underway. Overall, I'd call today a success, Jason concluded. Some turbulence, especially from Weiss, but the outcome is exactly what we wanted. Agreed, Stephanie said. From a legal and governance perspective, everything is now properly structured and disclosed. The potential IPO can proceed without this becoming an issue. Daniel nodded, but I noticed he seemed preoccupied, less triumphant than I would have expected given our successful navigation of this challenge. Daniel? I prompted. Your thoughts? He looked up, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. I'm just processing everything. Today went well, yes, but tomorrow you begin cancer treatment, and somehow that puts all of this. He gestured to encompass the boardroom, the company, the business concerns, into perspective. The room fell silent. Jason and Stephanie exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unsure how to respond to this sudden shift from professional to personal. Perhaps we should continue this tomorrow, Stephanie suggested tactfully. Eleanor needs to rest, and we can finalize the documentation in the morning. After they left, Daniel and I remained in his office. The setting sun cast long shadows across the space, painting the sleek, modern furniture in warm, golden light. I'm sorry, he said finally. That wasn't very professional of me. It was human, I corrected gently, and I appreciate your concern. But remember what I said before. My treatment is just another challenge to navigate, not a reason to put life on hold. He nodded, but the worry remained etched in his features. It's just seeing you in that boardroom today, handling Weiss's attacks with such confidence, demonstrating your expertise to the entire board, it made me realize how close I came to losing all of that wisdom and support because of my own short-sightedness. You haven't lost it, I reminded him. If anything, today marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of us, one where we collaborate more openly, professionally as well as personally. I know. He managed a small smile. And I'm grateful for that second chance. I just wish it hadn't taken a stroke and cancer diagnosis to wake me up to what really matters. We returned to the hotel in companionable silence, both lost in our own thoughts. In my room, I took time to rest before dinner, reflecting on the day's events. The board meeting had gone as well as we could have hoped, but Daniel's emotional reaction afterward had surprised me. It suggested a depth of feeling and personal growth that I hadn't fully appreciated until that moment. Dinner that evening was quiet, both of us too tired for substantial conversation. We discussed logistics for my return to Portland the next day and my first treatment session scheduled for the following morning. Daniel insisted on accompanying me, despite my assurances that Maria would be with me. "I want to be there," he said simply, "not to take control or make decisions for you, just to support you through it." I accepted his offer, recognizing it for what it was. Not the controlling behavior of the past, but genuine care expressed with respect for my autonomy. The next morning, we flew back to Portland on the company jet. Daniel used the time to handle work calls and emails, giving me space to read and rest. The consideration in this small gesture, working quietly nearby without hovering or intruding, spoke volumes about how our relationship had evolved. When we landed, Vanessa was waiting at the private terminal, along with Tyler, who was supposed to be in school. "I wanted to see Grandma before her treatment tomorrow," he explained when I expressed surprise at his presence. "Dad said it was important to show up for people when they're facing hard stuff." Daniel looked slightly embarrassed by this direct quote, but didn't contradict his son. "I might have mentioned something along those lines." Vanessa stepped forward, offering an awkward but sincere hug. "We thought you might like some company tonight. I made that wild rice soup you liked from the dinner last month." It was a thoughtful gesture from a woman who had once viewed me primarily as an inconvenience. "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely touched. "Thank you." At my house, I found that Grace had been busy in my absence. Fresh flowers brightened every room. The refrigerator was stocked with healthy foods recommended by my nutritionist, and a new comfortable recliner had been installed in the living room, perfect for resting during treatment recovery. The neighborhood pitched in, Grace explained when I thanked her. "Everyone wants to help somehow." That evening became unexpectedly special. Tyler showed me a school project he was working on, a renewable energy demonstration inspired by his father's company. Vanessa shared amusing stories from her marketing work, revealing a sense of humor I hadn't fully appreciated before. Daniel moved comfortably around my kitchen, helping serve the soup Vanessa had brought and cleaning up afterward without being asked. It struck me that this was the first truly relaxed family gathering we'd had since before my stroke. There was an authenticity to our interactions that had been missing before. No pretense, no underlying tensions, just genuine connection despite the health challenges looming on the horizon. As they prepared to leave, Tyler gave me a careful hug. "Good luck tomorrow, Grandma. Dad says you're going to kick cancer's butt." I laughed, delighted by his youthful confidence. "I'll certainly do my best." Vanessa embraced me next. "Call if you need anything. Absolutely anything. I've cleared my schedule for the next few days." When they had gone out to the car, Daniel lingered a moment longer. "What time should I pick you up tomorrow?" "My appointment is at 10. Maria will be here at 8 to help me prepare." He nodded. "I'll be here at 9 then." "And Mom?" His voice grew softer. "Thank you for letting us be part of this. I know you value your independence, and you could handle this alone if you chose to. It means a lot that you're allowing us to support you." The sincerity in his words touched me deeply. Thank you for offering support without trying to take control. It makes accepting help much easier. He smiled, understanding precisely what I meant. "I'm learning. Slowly, maybe, but learning." After they left, I sat quietly in my garden, watching twilight settle over Portland. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the beginning of cancer treatment, with its uncertainties and side effects. But tonight had brought something unexpected and precious, the sense of family as it should be, supportive, respectful, connected by bonds that transcended obligation or convenience. The path ahead would not be easy, Cancer treatment rarely is, regardless of prognosis or resources. The company still faced challenges, particularly with the government contract negotiation and Weiss's lingering opposition. But for the first time in many years, I felt surrounded by authentic support rather than dutiful obligation. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I found myself experiencing a surprising emotion: gratitude. Not for the stroke or the cancer. Diagnosis, I would never be grateful for illness, but for the clarity these challenges had brought. They had stripped away pretense and forced a reckoning that might otherwise have never occurred. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what truly matters. In my case, it had taken two. But the result? A son who had rediscovered his humanity, a daughter-in-law who had found empathy, a grandson whose natural compassion had been encouraged rather than suppressed, was worth the difficult journey. Tomorrow would bring its own trials. But tonight, I would rest in the knowledge that whatever came next, I would face it not as a burden to be managed, but as a person worthy of respect, support, and genuine care. My first day of cancer treatment dawned with unexpected serenity. Perhaps it was the calm that comes from facing what can't be avoided, or maybe it was simply the peace of having made my decisions, both personal and professional, with clear eyes and firm resolve. Daniel arrived punctually at 9, carrying a small gift bag. "It's a treatment kit," he explained somewhat self-consciously as he handed it to me. Vanessa and Tyler helped put it together. Inside, I found soft wool socks, a cashmere scarf, premium lip balm, a silk sleep mask, noise-canceling earbuds, and a small leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. "The nurse navigator mentioned treatment can make you cold and sensitive," Daniel explained. "And Tyler insisted you needed something to write in. He said you always have important thoughts." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me deeply. "Thank you. This is perfect." Maria had already helped me prepare for the day, reviewing instructions from Dr. Levine about hydration and medications. She would accompany us to the first treatment, then create a care schedule coordinating her. Professional support with family assistance. The oncology center occupied the top floor of a modern medical building, its waiting area designed to feel more like a comfortable lounge than a clinical space. Soft music played in the background, and large windows offered views of Mount Hood in the distance. Despite these efforts at comfort, nothing could entirely disguise the reality of why we were there. After checking in, a nurse escorted us to a treatment bay, a semi-private space with a comfortable recliner, television, and space for a support person to sit nearby. She efficiently reviewed my medical history, inserted my IV line, and explained each medication that would be administered. "The targeted therapy itself doesn't take long to infuse," she explained, "but we'll keep you for observation after since this is your first treatment. The whole process will take about 4 hours today, likely shorter for future sessions." Daniel settled into the chair beside me, opening his laptop but keeping the screen dimmed. "I'll be quiet, but I'm here if you need anything," he assured me. As the medication began flowing into my veins, I felt a strange disconnection. This clear liquid supposedly fighting invisible cancer cells within my body. No immediate sensation, no dramatic effect, just the cool touch of the IV fluid and the steady beep of the infusion pump. I opened the journal Tyler had included in my gift bag and began to write, not profound thoughts as he had imagined, but simple observations about this moment, this threshold I was crossing. There was something powerful about documenting the experience, transforming myself from passive patient to active observer. The hours passed more quickly than I'd anticipated. Daniel worked quietly, occasionally glancing up to check on me, respecting my space while maintaining a supportive presence. When the infusion finished, we waited through the observation period, making small talk about inconsequential matters, the weather, a book I'd been reading, Tyler's upcoming soccer tournament. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked as we finally prepared to leave. "Physically, about the same," I replied honestly. "They say the side effects usually develop over the next few days." He nodded, helping gather my things. And otherwise? I considered the question carefully. Relieved in a way. There's clarity in beginning something you've been anticipating, even something difficult. The unknown becomes known. You've always been good at that, facing things directly, Daniel observed. I think I spent years avoiding difficult truths, rather than confronting them. It was an insightful self-assessment, one that showed how far he'd come in his personal reflection. It's a learned skill, I assured him, one you seem to be developing quite well lately. The next few days brought the promised side effects: fatigue that settled deep in my bones, a persistent queasiness that made eating unappealing, occasional dizziness when I stood too quickly. But they were manageable, more an inconvenience than the debilitating symptoms I had feared. My support system functioned with surprising efficiency. Maria managed my medical schedule and daily care needs. Grace handled grocery shopping and neighborhood. Communication. Daniel arranged transportation to appointments and worked remotely from my house 2 days each week. Vanessa prepared freezer meals following my nutritionist's guidelines. And Tyler, despite his busy student schedule, spent every Sunday afternoon with me, playing chess and helping with my rehabilitation exercises. What struck me most was how organic this support had become. Not the reluctant obligation I had once feared, but genuine care expressed through practical assistance. No one tried to override my preferences or make decisions without my input. My autonomy remained intact, even as I accepted help. 3 weeks into my treatment, Raymond arrived with news about Innovate Northwest. The company had secured the government contract, a 5-year agreement worth over $300 million to develop and implement renewable energy storage solutions for military installations. The board credits Aurora's direct involvement as a key factor, Raymond reported, handing me the official press release. Apparently, your handling of Weiss during the meeting impressed several government representatives who were conducting due diligence research. I smiled at this unexpected development. And how did Weiss react to being outmaneuvered? Raymond chuckled. He's publicly claiming it was his tough questioning that revealed Aurora's strength and stability. Privately, he's furious, but smart. Enough to align himself with success. The contract announcement triggered a cascade of positive developments for Innovate Northwest. The stock valuation soared in private markets. New investors expressed interest in the upcoming funding round. Industry publications featured profiles of the company's innovative technology and promising future. Through it all, Daniel managed the spotlight with a new humility that surprised industry observers accustomed to his previous intense, sometimes rigid leadership style. In interviews, he consistently credited his team's collaborative efforts and the steady guidance of long-term investors, particularly Aurora. You've taught him well, Grace observed one evening as we watched Daniel's interview on a business news program. He's finally learned to shine without casting shadows. It was an apt description of the change in Daniel's approach. His brilliance remained undimmed, but it no longer seemed to require dimming others to maintain its intensity. 6 weeks into my treatment, Dr. Levine scheduled comprehensive testing to evaluate my response. The results exceeded even her optimistic expectations. The cancer cells are responding remarkably well to the targeted therapy, she explained, displaying my test results. Your blood counts are improving, and the enlarged lymph nodes have reduced significantly in size. If this trajectory continues, we may be able to reduce your treatment frequency after the 3-month mark. It was the first unequivocally positive medical news I'd received since my stroke, and I allowed myself to feel genuine optimism. The treatment wasn't a cure. CLL would remain a chronic condition requiring monitoring and eventual additional treatment, but it had granted me time and quality of life beyond my initial fears. That evening, Daniel, Vanessa, and Tyler came over to celebrate the good news. They arrived bearing gifts, a luxurious cashmere throw from Daniel, to keep you warm during treatment, a beautiful orchid from Vanessa, something that thrives with minimal care on challenging days. And a hand-drawn card from Tyler featuring a superhero character he'd created called Grandma Invincible. As we shared dinner on my patio, enjoying the mild spring evening, I was struck by how much had changed in our family dynamic over these past months. The conversation flowed easily, with genuine interest in each other's thoughts and experiences. Vanessa spoke openly about a professional setback she was navigating. Daniel listened attentively rather than immediately offering solutions. Tyler shared his anxieties about middle school with a vulnerability that would have been discouraged in the achievement-focused atmosphere of their previous household. "I've been thinking," Daniel said as we finished dessert, "about making some changes at Innovate Northwest." "What kind of changes?" I asked, curious about his thoughtful tone. "Structural ones. The company's grown so rapidly that we've never really addressed work-life balance in a meaningful way. We talk about sustainability for the planet, but not for the people creating the technology." He glanced at Vanessa, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been part of that problem, expecting everyone to maintain the same intensive schedule I kept, measuring dedication by hours worked rather than results achieved." "That's a significant shift in philosophy," I observed. "What prompted it?" "Watching you," he replied simply. "Seeing how you've approached your health challenges, methodically, realistically, balancing treatment with quality of life. It made me realize we should apply the same principles to how we operate as a company." Vanessa leaned forward. "He's already implemented some changes: flexible scheduling, improved parental leave, mental health resources. The response has been overwhelmingly positive." "The productivity metrics haven't suffered either," Daniel added. "If anything, they've improved. Turns out people do better work when they're not constantly exhausted and stressed." I smiled at the obvious revelation. "You mean treating employees as complete human beings with lives outside work actually benefits the company? Revolutionary." Daniel laughed, acknowledging the gentle teasing. I know. You've been telling me this for years. Sometimes slow learners eventually catch up." After dinner, Tyler helped clear the table while Daniel and Vanessa moved to the living room. I overheard fragments of their conversation, something about restructuring their household schedule to create more family time. Another small but significant shift in priorities. "Grandma," Tyler said as we loaded the dishwasher, "can I ask you something serious?" "Of course." He hesitated, carefully arranging silverware in the basket. "Are you scared? About the cancer? I mean?" The directness of his question took me by surprise, but I answered honestly. "Sometimes. Not constantly, but yes. There are moments when I'm afraid." He nodded, absorbing this. "That's what I thought. Dad used to always say you weren't worried about anything, that you were totally fine and I shouldn't bring it up. But that didn't make sense to me. Everyone gets scared sometimes." "Your father was trying to protect you," I explained. "Adults sometimes think that's the right approach." "But it's not," Tyler said with the clear conviction of youth. "It just makes kids feel like they can't talk about hard stuff. Like their feelings aren't important." His insight was remarkable for a 12-year-old. "You're absolutely right. How did you get so wise?" He shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. "I don't know. Maybe I take after my grandma." 2 months later, Innovate Northwest officially announced its intention to pursue an initial public offering. The valuation projections exceeded even the most optimistic forecasts, driven by the government contract success and growing commercial applications of the company's energy storage technology. As preparations for the IPO intensified, I continued my board participation, attending meetings remotely when treatment side effects made travel difficult. My cancer had stabilized, not gone, but effectively managed, allowing me to maintain an active role in both professional and personal spheres. One evening, as Daniel and I reviewed the latest prospectus draft in my study, he broached a subject we had carefully avoided. "We need to discuss Aurora's position post-IPO," he said, The underwriters want clarity on whether you intend to maintain your full 40% stake or diversify after the lockup period. It was a reasonable question with significant implications for market perception and stock stability. I had been considering it for weeks, weighing options and potential outcomes. I intend to maintain 30% indefinitely, I replied after a moment. The remaining 10% will be placed in trust for Tyler's future education and philanthropic ventures, with staggered vesting to prevent market disruption. Daniel looked surprised. You're creating a trust for Tyler? Yes. An educational and charitable trust he'll control when he turns 25, with advisory provisions beginning at 18. I smiled at his expression. Is that a problem? No, not at all. It's incredibly generous. He paused, searching for words. After everything that happened between us, you're still thinking of my son's future this way? Tyler is my grandson, I said simply. My relationship with him exists independently of any past difficulties between you and me. Daniel nodded slowly. You've always been better at separating issues than I have. I tend to let conflicts in one area affect everything. Another learned skill, I assured him. One that typically improves with age and experience. He smiled, ruefully. Then there's hope for me yet. The IPO launched 3 months later to extraordinary market response. Innovate Northwest's stock opened significantly above the offering price and continued climbing throughout the day. Financial analysts praised the company's solid fundamentals, innovative technology, and stable leadership structure. At the ceremonial bell ringing on the exchange floor, Daniel insisted I stand beside him, along with Jason and the core engineering team. It was a meaningful gesture, acknowledging publicly that Aurora's support had been integral to the company's success. The financial press noted the unusual mother-son corporate connection, but the narrative was overwhelmingly positive, highlighting the governance structures we had implemented to address potential conflicts. That evening, Daniel hosted a celebration, dinner at Portland's most exclusive restaurant. The guest list included key executives, board members, and family. Even Catherine Alvarez flew in from New York to attend, bringing news that her investment firm was increasing its position in Innovate Northwest based on strong fundamentals and governance. To Innovate Northwest, Daniel toasted, raising his glass once everyone was seated. To the team that made this day possible, to the investors who believed in our vision, and he turned toward me, his expression sincere. To the one person without whom none of this would have happened. My mother, Eleanor Mitchell, who provided not just capital but wisdom, guidance, and occasionally necessary course corrections. Glasses were raised amid good-natured laughter and applause. I accepted the acknowledgement with a simple nod, touched by the genuine appreciation in Daniel's voice. Later in the evening, as conversations flowed around the table, Catherine leaned toward me. You've come a long way from that hospital bed where he called you a burden, she observed quietly. I looked at her in surprise. How did you know about that? She smiled slightly. Daniel told me. When I asked why Aurora was suddenly taking a direct board role, he didn't give me the sanitized version you presented to the full board. He told me the truth. About his behavior after your stroke, about the wake-up call when he discovered you were Aurora. He wanted my help ensuring the board understood that his personal relationship with you would never compromise his professional judgment. I was stunned. Daniel had voluntarily revealed his lowest moment to a respected board member, an admission that could have damaged his professional reputation. That couldn't have been an easy conversation. It wasn't, Catherine. Confirmed, but it was an honest one. He said something that stuck with me. That leadership isn't about never making mistakes, but about acknowledging them and demonstrating growth. That's when I knew your company was in good hands. Across the table, Daniel was engaged in animated conversation with Tyler, listening intently to something my grandson was explaining with enthusiastic hand gestures. Vanessa watched them with obvious affection, occasionally contributing to the discussion. They looked like what they had become, a family connected by more than obligation or circumstance, bound by genuine care and mutual respect. 1 year to, the day after my stroke, I hosted a small gathering in my garden. The spring flowers were blooming, filling the air with subtle fragrance. My cancer remained in remission. My stroke rehabilitation had progressed to the point where only minimal weakness remained in my left hand, and I had resumed most of my previous activities with few accommodations. Daniel arrived early to help set up, moving chairs and arranging the outdoor dining area. "Hard to believe it's been a year," he observed as we worked together. "In some ways it feels longer," I replied. "So much has changed." He nodded thoughtfully. "I was thinking about that this morning, about who I was a year ago versus who I am now. I barely recognize that person." "Growth isn't always comfortable," I observed, "but it's almost always worthwhile." "Worth every difficult moment," he agreed. "Though I wish the catalyst had been something other than your health crises." I understood his lingering regret. Life rarely offers us the lessons we want in the packaging we'd prefer. What matters is that when the opportunity for growth appeared, however painfully, you embraced it rather than turning away. As our guests arrived, Grace, Raymond, Maria, Vanessa, Tyler, and a few close friends who had supported me throughout the year, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the stroke or the cancer, which I would have gladly avoided, but for the clarity they had brought, the relationships they had transformed, the priorities they had illuminated. My son had once called me a burden. That moment, painful as it was, had become the catalyst for honest reckoning and genuine change. The company I had secretly supported for years was now publicly thriving, with my role acknowledged and respected. The family that had once viewed me primarily through the lens of convenience or inconvenience now engaged with me as a full person with value beyond utility. As we gathered around the table, sharing food and conversation in the gentle spring evening, I realized that this connection, this authenticity, this mutual respect, was what I had sought all along. Not wealth or power or even independence, for its own sake, but the freedom to be fully myself and be valued for who I truly was. Daniel raised his glass in a quiet toast. "To second chances," he said simply, "and to the courage to make the most of them." I raised my own glass in response, meeting his gaze with understanding that transcended words. We had both been granted second chances, me through medical intervention and treatment, him through the painful gift of self-awareness. Neither of us had wasted the opportunity. Some burdens, it turns out, are worth carrying. The weight of honest relationships, the responsibility of legacy planning, the obligation to face reality with clear eyes. What cannot and should not be borne is the burden of being defined solely by one's utility to others, valued only for what one provides rather than who one is. That burden, at least, I had set down permanently, and in doing so, had found a lightness of spirit that no financial windfall or corporate success could ever provide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.